Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to the program. Welcome to our audience. Welcome to our family. Please comment. And of course, I'm not bashful. I'm a well-dressed beggar. I have a shirt on today with a collar, if you can see that on YouTube. So if you think that we're doing a good job, give us a 5-star rating. That helps us in rankings in the podcast distribution points. Also, too, if you're a return listener, thank you for playing along with this and your listenership. Because of you and our great guests, the show just recently cracked the top 10 fastest growing podcasts out there. We're hoping to get in the top 5% here soon. That's quite an accomplishment for you folks as our listeners and our guests, because there are over 1 million choices in podcasts out there in the world today. So it's a lot of fun. A little bit of house cleaning, just as we say always. Don't forget to subscribe, no matter who you are. I will not be ashamed of begging, so give us 5 stars. Again, remind you of that. If you don't like the podcast distribution system you're on today, we're on 23 worldwide. The show is currently listened to in 32 countries, 6 continents. And if I could figure out how to market to penguins and maybe possibly buy them all phones, we probably have listeners in Antarctica too. All right. So the last thing I always tell people to do is to check us out on the show website. Now, you can listen to the podcast there if you want, just by a browser. However, most importantly, the stories we tell, the people we introduce you to, and the interesting topics, they're all highlighted there. So we have bios and information and links to just about everybody that we've ever had on the show, today's current guests, and those in the future. We generally have about 30 in the queue to be interviewed. So we're excited. So you can go out there and take a look of, I want to tune in when this one gets published. Okay, so fantastic. Today, I am excited. I tell people this all the time. I've got too many interests for just one lifetime. And my problem is around the corner is another discovery. There's something else to learn. Well, we've got something to learn today, another discovery. And so let me introduce you to our guest here today. She is very multi-talented. Now, her career to make money at one point in time was a registered nurse. Okay, so caregiver, registered nurse. Did that for almost 40 years. She is an artist, and she has created jewelry, did a lot of silversmithing, a painter, a sculptor, basically an illustrator too. She's doing illustrations for some books. She's from the future. So here in the Western Hemisphere of the United States, where a lot of our people are listening to, she's down under. She's in New Zealand. So I love it because it's back to the future whenever I get to interview my friends down under. She's also a techno-weenie too, and that is an affectionate term, techno-geek, techno-weenie. She builds websites, can code, all that kind of stuff. So, man, she's got a pile of absolutely amazing creative talents. But the other one I want to mention today, and we'll probably talk most about today on today's show, some people would refer this to as a medium, but it's more than that. So our guest today is a spiritual sensitive. And she's going to explain that term to us today. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Marianne Coleman. Marianne, how are you today?
Great, thanks. Thank you very much for having me, Rex. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
Well, glad to have you. We're excited to hear about your stuff. And when I was on the booking engine looking through people to book on the show, one thing that got my attention was UFOs. I haven't heard anybody that was either a medium or a spiritual sensitive and knew anything about UFOs and stuff. So I said, man, I got to get Marianne on the show. So you know how we do this. There are people who play along multitasking on multiple devices. So if you could you give out a website or one of your social media links so people can find you and follow the things you're up to?
I'm on most social media. Thank you, Rex. I have a Facebook page, WT Shadowlands it is, on Facebook. I'm on Instagram under Walking the Shadowlands, Twitter at Shadowlands10. I'm on TikTok even. My kids think that's really funny. At walking _the Shadowlands. Okay. So I'm on pretty much every social media.
You're everywhere. Well, you tell your kids to zip their lip because, TikTok is the bomb right now. We did an episode with one of the leading TikTok consultants earlier this year, and TikTok's on fire. I believe it's going to be a replacement for one or two of the biggest social media platforms. 85% of the people on TikTok are over the age of 24, and 35% are over age 35. So you just tell those youngsters, knock it off, because TikTok's the place to be. It's fun stuff.
I enjoy it.
Yeah, fun stuff. Okay, so the show, we talk about people's stories, and that's the interesting part about what we do. And I recently had a guest who said, it was nice to be on this show because it's not a typical interview. It's a get to know you session. So that's what we are doing today. We'll talk about some things that are interesting, but we really want to get to know you, because every interesting person doing successful things is a story. And that's how I look at it. So if you could, Marianne, what we'd like you to do today on the show is to take us back in time, because we are all accumulative of our experiences. Now, our talents matter, okay? But our experiences and our environments help shape us, okay?
Right.
So I like to go back to people's early beginnings and understand, because in our early lives, we can have significant shaping forces, okay? So I'd like to know, where were you born, okay? I'd like to know if you have siblings. Okay. Now, if you have any siblings that survived your harassment, that would be a good thing. Then we also would like to know about the things you did growing up, your interests. So if you played sports or were into dance or music, or heck, even if it was shoplifting, let us know what you were doing as a youth. Okay. And then also, too, we want to understand a little bit about your education. But I want to know some family dynamics. So what did your parents do for a living? Okay. That shapes a lot of us. And sometimes that's motivation where we got a lot of support, or it might be counter support where we're like, hey, I'm going to show this to you kind of thing. So why don't we go to that point? Don't worry about that full long list of those questions. I'll just drive from there. So take us back to where we started. Where were you born, Marianne?
I was born in a town in the centre of the North Island of New Zealand. New Zealand is, of course, three islands, the North, the South, and a little island further down. The town I was born in is called Hamilton, which is kind of central North Island.
Okay, fantastic. Now, do you have siblings?
I had 5 sisters. One has passed. I have 4 sisters and 3 brothers.
Oh my goodness!
I come from a very large family.
Very large family. Yeah. Goodness gracious!
Even by those days standards, it was a large family. Yeah.
So a total of 8 kids, huh? Wow, that is crazy. Where do you fall in that pecking order?
I'm third to oldest.
Third to oldest. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in the top half of the pecking order of the family.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, growing up, what was your family like? What did your father do? What did your mother do? What type of work or things that they were doing to help shape your life?
Well, of course, I grew up I was born in the 50s, 65 this year. So I was born in 1956. So in those days in New Zealand, women were pretty much homemakers.
Sure.
Mostly they didn't work outside of the home if they had a family, unless circumstances, forced that issue. So mum was a homemaker. Okay. My dad initially in my early years was a share milker, which is kind of like a dairy farmer.
Okay.
And then after that, after we left the dairy farming, he started a demolition business. So he was he pulled down buildings and houses and had a second hand, I don't know what you call it in the States, but a yard where people could buy fittings from old houses and stuff like that.
Oh, cool. Neat. Okay. So he was an entrepreneur, had his own business, that kind of thing. Mom was a stay-home caretaker, which I love that. I wish we had more of that in the world. I think families need that, but that's just my goofy opinion. So what types of things were you interested in when you weren't at school or haranguing with your siblings?
Well, I always have had an interest in when I was younger, I used to do singing and elocution. I always had a very keen interest in that. And so I had singing lessons for a while, and I used to do theatre work. Really loved it. And that was something that I continued during my nursing years as a kind of like a grounding and a balancing. for the stress of the nursing years.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, singing's a great outlet. Singing's an awesome outlet. Okay.
Yeah.
Is your family really tight, close knit, or are they a little scattered, or eight's a big family?
Yeah, we're pretty scattered now. The family dynamics when we grew up weren't that great.
Okay.
So we pretty much grew up as strangers sharing the same house, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yep, I've been seeing some homes like that. Yep.
Yeah, and it's really only as we've gotten older that we've started to develop relationships, which is really cool.
Yeah. What are the age ranges from the oldest down to the youngest? How many years?
Well, my oldest surviving sister, because the oldest one died, she's 18 months older than me, so she's 66.
Okay.
Then there's me, and they all go down from there.
Yeah.
The girls were all first, the boys were the last born.
Okay. So how many years between your oldest sister, even though she's passed, all the way down to your youngest brother?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. I think Kim's 50. Oh gosh. Oh, I haven't thought about that before.
Is that like 16 years, or how many were the kids coming pretty consistently?
Well, my oldest sister, the one that passed, was actually my half sister.
Okay.
So from my sister, it was pretty consistent about every couple of years. Yeah.
Okay. So roughly around 16 years or so.
Yeah.
That's a long time for moms and dads to be raising youngins, I'll tell you.
I'll say.
Yeah, that's crazy. Time. Okay. From an economics perspective, was it stressful at home? I mean, was it hard for your dad to make ends meet? Did you guys live in comfort? What was it like? Do you remember growing up?
Well, we didn't have a lot of money, I don't think.
Okay.
We were probably pretty poor, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really not have anything to judge it by, because it was how I grew up and it was all I knew. So.
Sure. Well, I asked that question too because economic stress can, create motivations or depression.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, kind of thing like that. I mean, if your single thought of the day is getting enough food to eat, that's a different thing than other things growing up. Okay, so after you got done with your what we would call high school here in the United States, obviously you probably went on to university to get your nursing degree.
No.
No, you didn't. Okay, tell us about that.
In New Zealand, when I started my training, I started in 1972. And in those days, it wasn't university-based training. It was on-the-job, hospital-based training.
Oh, wow.
So we started as student nurses, and we also had to live in a nurse's home. So it was very British, very moralistic, very almost militarily run. Like there was a definite hierarchy. And if you were a student nurse, unless you had written permission from the matron of the hospital, you had to live in the nurse's home.
Mm-hmm.
And they had curfews, did bed checks. They protected our virtue, it's just so ridiculous looking at it now, but that's how it was. And so we did so many hours of ward work and so many hours of study.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
and honestly, I think that's the better way of training. They brought in university-based training probably when I had just about finished my training.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, we have so many people leaving nursing these days because they're not working on the job all the time. They only do so many hours in their training, so they don't get the full reality of what it's like in a hospital working full time.
Yeah.
So it's a real culture shock for them.
Well, and what we see here in the States, I don't know how it is in New Zealand, but they've even specialized nursing now. So you might be a maternity nurse, for babies, or you might be someone who works with just Alzheimer's and mental health care. You might be someone who is, various different specialties. And so I think it is different today compared to probably what it was in 1972.
And also in New Zealand, we have free healthcare, which is
Ah,
quite different to what it is. So all the hospitals I worked in, except for private hospitals, and private hospitals really didn't start to come in probably, and I don't know, I'm thinking maybe the 80s when they sort of really started to take a hold in New Zealand. But public hospitals are free. In fact, like my broken arm that I just did, that's cost me nothing.
yeah.
And in fact, the government is providing me with home help to do my housework, which I can't do. They're providing me with meals. I'm getting a meal service. They're bringing me in a cooked meal every day because I can't cook for myself at the moment. So we're very lucky in New Zealand. We try to look after our people.
Yeah.
So the hospital system was quite different. Quite
different. Okay. So you've done so many things. We could probably talk for hours, but the thing I really want to talk about today is when did you recognize these skills or the gift of being a medium or a spiritual sensitive? When did that pop up in your life?
Oh, really early.
Really early?
In fact, it's really hard to distinguish when I recognize that from when I started having my encounters with star people. I was very, very, very young. My first, it's so intertwined, it's really hard to say. I've known all my life, but really I only accepted and acknowledged who I was in my 30s. Up until then, I kind of tried to pretend it didn't exist in a way, because you want to fit in with everybody else. You want to feel like you belong. So I hid a lot of who I was. From the spiritual sense, that
From
is.
the spiritual sense.
I was never ever shy about my star people stuff, ever. No,
okay.
That was never.
Now, when you talk star people stuff, is that in being able to see spirits then?
No. Okay. I'm talking about extraterrestrials.
Oh, extraterrestrials. Okay. Fantastic. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make sure we get
that's okay.
Our audience and I have the same understanding that you do. So let me ask you this question, because it's something I've always wondered. When someone is a medium or a spiritual sensitive, is it scary the first couple times that you have those experiences where you're reaching through this current existence and being able to reach out to that?
For some young children, it can be very scary. Because it depends on their gifts. For me, it wasn't because I had it's so intertwined. It's really hard. So talking about somebody else, okay, if you've got a child who sees spirit, it can be very scary depending on their abilities, because some see spirit as they are when they passed. Like if they died with a head injury, they'll see the spirit with a good example of that was the movie The Sixth Sense. Did you ever see that with Bruce Willis?
Yeah, absolutely.
How the kids saw the people with head injuries. So for a child to see something like that is really traumatic.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much to scare a child, even if the spirit didn't intend that to happen. It can be very scary.
Okay.
And even today, if I'm sitting here talking and a spirit suddenly pops up in front of me, I would let out a squeal, because that's a normal human fight or flight reaction.
Sure.
And that's just a physiological thing that you really can't control. But once you get over that initial shock, then it's fine.
Yeah, because for me, I was kind of wondering, I've been thinking about this, knowing that our interview was coming up, and I was like, I might be able to just scare myself all the time if I was a medium, right? I mean, who knows about talking to anybody else about this? I mean, I'd probably be running from my own shadow all the time if I was in that situation. No. So, and the next question I want to ask, and it's just kind of curiosity, because I don't really know much about this area of human behavior and all that good stuff. Do any of your siblings have the same gift?
I have one sister. Well, I have two sisters actually who see spirit as well. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, it tends to be a familial thing.
Okay. So passed on. Now, do you know of any of your ancestors that have it? So parents, grandparents?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this ability to have, I guess it's possibly, I'm not sure clairvoyance is the right name for it, but this ability to see the spirits or see stars, it's passed around genetically then, I would assume.
Yes. Oh, well, you know, oh, sorry, I'm just fixing my pillow.
Yeah.
I always say to people, everybody has abilities, but is that most people don't recognize that they have it. It's a basic human skill, like something that we've evolved over the eons. Firstly, it started out to protect us, because we needed to know if there was danger
Right,
around.
danger, sure, flight or fight.
Fight or flight. So we become hyper alert to our surroundings. And so everybody has this, but most people don't recognize it. Or if they think they don't recognize what they're feeling. Like they might get gut feeling or
Right.
an intuition, or they just feel
Intuition.
like they need to go and do something. It's the same thing.
My mother has these capabilities. She's still with us. She's 78 now. But she would have visions of like where she was going to live. She knew the profile and what my father's face looked like a decade before she met him.
Wow.
She had visions into the first house they lived in together. I mean, down to the T as such. So, and then she would have intuitions when things were going wrong or danger. My father was nearly killed in an accident as a police officer, a highway patrolman, where he was squished between two cars from a drunk driver hitting them. And we were 30 miles away at a friend's house. And I can remember her saying, "We have to go." And we had just sat down for dinner and we were all excited for dinner. She goes, "We have to go. Something's wrong." And so she packed us all up and in a hurry ran us out to the station wagon and took us home. And the police were waiting at our door looking for us.
Wow.
I mean, because this was in 71 and, no cell phones or that kind of thing. And
Right.
my father literally had died 3 times while they were operating on him because of this accident. But my mom, she knew something was gone wrong. So I've always had a curiosity with this, but I've never experienced meeting anybody that does have these types of skills.
There's actually, your mom sounds pretty exceptional. There's actually a number of areas, and not all mediums have the same. Every gift, every person is unique.
Yeah.
So the abilities that they have are unique. So there are a number of, I call them the clears. There's clear cognizance, which is the seeing visions,
Yep.
seeing the future. Clear sentience, which is feelings. You feel it, and this is how I work mostly. I do have clear, I do see the future, but I mostly work in feelings. That's how
Okay.
I work. So I get this feeling in my body about something.
Okay.
And it's just recognizing what I'm feeling and putting it into words. So that's clear sentience. Clear cognizance, which is the other ability I have, is just a knowing. You just know something, and it's always the truth. But you just don't know how you know it. You just know it.
Okay.
And then there's other abilities like clear audience. Now that's where people can hear spirit audibly with their external ear. Like you can hear me talking to you. And then there's other clears, which are, and I can't remember the names. One is smelling and one is tasting. So they involve all the senses pretty much.
All those things, if I was going to look at my genetics and stuff, about the only one that I might be able to claim would be probably clear cognizance, because I do on a regular basis get intuitions or cognizance on things that I just know are right and they end up being right. And so never thought about that, never understood that might be something that was more than just, intuition.
Yeah.
So now, how old were you when you first started seeing or communicating with star people? Because that's different, really young. Okay.
Really young. My first memory, and it's not a conscious memory of seeing star people, but it's a base memory that I have that's very clear. I was 18 months old. My parents had put me to bed in my cot. We were out in the farm. The doors were locked. The windows were shut. I was in bed asleep. And they could hear me crying. And they went into the bedroom to see what was wrong with me, and they couldn't find me. I wasn't in my cot. My cot sides were still up. I wasn't in my cot. They frantically searched the house, couldn't find me, could hear me crying, and finally they found me outside. Outside.
Wow.
on the front lawn. And from my part, I remember just the feelings pretty much of looking up at the stars and wanting to be back there, and then crying because, I was a kid and I was outside, it was dark and it was scary.
Yeah.
And my parents found me outside, and they talked about that for years. They could never understand how
you got
I
out there.
ended up outside. And I realized later that my star people had done that so I would have a base memory to base everything else off of, because my parents remember that clearly, very clearly.
Okay. So when you have either spiritual sensitive type experiences, whether it's earthly oriented or star people oriented, is this on a regular basis? Does it come frequently? Is it something you can summons? Tell me a little bit more about that.
The spiritual stuff, that's all the time. It's a constant light breathing.
Okay.
Really. I do have very firm boundaries set with spirit, so they don't pop in it's not like having a radio going in my mind 24/7. I have these boundaries set with them, and they abide by the boundaries that I set. So unless, like, I run a Facebook group, which actually my podcast started from, my members asked me if I'd start a podcast. And they ask questions and I give them responses, and in those times spirit will give me information, because I've set myself those times to be available, but they don't, just unless it's to warn me, like this accident I had last week. They warned me. They said, Marianne, there's danger coming up. They didn't specifically state what it was, but they said you have to be very, very careful. And then that later that day I had my accident.
Wow. Okay. So back to another part of my question. Is it something you can summons and say, okay, I'm going to reach out and do these things today? Or is it something that comes to you sort of on a random basis with these parameters, the spiritual stuff, you have these parameters?
Oh, no. I can, like spirit coming to me, that's different. But my gifts, they're like on tap, so to speak. I can just access them anytime I need them. Yeah.
Okay, so just learning all about this, because I know nothing. Kind of the Sergeant Schultz from...
I remember him. He was my favorite character.
I know nothing. Hogan's Heroes. Goodness gracious, that dates us all.
It does, doesn't it?
I'm a decade younger than you, but I'm sure I watched a lot of the same shows like Hogan's Heroes and PT-74 and Gilligan's Islands and some of those. McHale's Navy. I'm sorry. That kind of stuff. That was back when TV was really simple. Okay.
Yes.
So trying to understand this, do you basically say, I need an insight? I mean, I want to have a conversation. I want, how is it do you make this determination of when you want to summons this?
Are you talking about talking to spirit or just accessing
both? We're gonna talk both.
Well, I just talk to them all the time. It's not like summoning them. They're right here. They're only ever a thought away.
Okay.
It's not like I have to get into a trance and go, no.
Yeah. No. Okay.
It's just like, as soon as I open myself to, like, for example, answering a question that a person in my group has, they're there, just like that.
Okay. And how about the star people?
Star people, I've had ongoing encounters since I was a child. That's a bit different. It's like on their time zone. And there is actually, and this is a thing that I struggle with, there is no time outside of this reality. Time as we know it doesn't exist. It's a man-made concept.
Yeah. Okay, so have you actually seen, and I guess it's a really dumb question, but as the old Chevy Chase line from Fletch, there's no such thing as a dumb question.
There
There's
is no
just
such thing as dumb question.
dumb people asking questions. So I'm going to fit in that category. Have you actually seen then Craft?
I've been on Craft.
You've been on Craft.
I've been on Craft, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my entire
Wow.
life. I'll tell you my earliest visual memory of star people. Now, I called them star people because as a child they were people, humanoids in shape, an arm, two legs, two arms, trunk, a head. And they came from the stars, so I called them star people, and I just called them that my entire life. So I was about 3.
Okay.
And my dad was at the stage the sharemilker, and we had been somewhere now in the late 50s in New Zealand, out in the Wops, we called it, out in the country, was way out in the country.
Mm-hmm.
There were no street lights. The roads were mostly gravel or dirt.
Sure. So you didn't have light pollution out there, right?
No light pollution, no.
Okay.
Not at all. And so we had been somewhere, it can't have been too late, but it was dark because we're driving home, and we thought there was this car behind us because there's this bright light. It was so bright that Dad had to flick up his rear vision mirror. And it was unusual to see another car, but not that unusual. It wasn't that common, but it wasn't unusual. So this car followed us along the road. Now, in our car was my older sister, Eileen, who's passed, my other sister, older sister, Lynn, and myself. I was the baby at that stage, and my mum and dad. And we had to turn off the road on the left to go down to our farm, and the gate was shut so the cattle couldn't get out. And so as soon as we paused to turn, the light that was behind us rose vertically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, rose vertically and shot up in the air. And Mum and Dad were, of course, shocked because, they thought it was a car, even though the light was bright. They had never for 1 minute thought it was anything else. So we turned to go down to the gate, and Dad stopped the car so one of them could get out and open the gate. And as soon as he stopped the car, this bright white light shot down above us, like you see in the movies, that Fire in the Sky movie, the Travis Walton story.
Yep.
You know how that light came down over the car? It was exactly like that, but it was a bright white light. And my sisters were really scared. They were crying. Mum and Dad were freaking out. They were arguing about who was going to get out and open the gate doors so we could, go to safety. And I was the only one who wasn't scared because I knew who it was. I could feel the energies, and I was excited. And anyway, in the light, around the car windows, you could see these humanoid forms. You could just see like a silhouette of these humanoid forms walking around the car.
Wow.
And that's the last thing I remember. And my mum and dad remember the light. They don't remember seeing any humanoid forms, but they remembered the light.
Now, did you ever share these experiences or these abilities? Did you ever tell, kids at school or friends or anything like that?
About my star people, yeah, I always talked about my star people. I've never not talked about them because they're as real to me as you are,
Sure.
They're as much part of my life, and often to my detriment because I didn't realize that not everybody experienced them.
That's what I was wondering, because it's like...
Until I got a little bit older, and then I learned pretty quickly that, this is not something that everybody has or deals with.
Wow. Okay. So you've been on Craft multiple times then. Now, did you actually depart the atmosphere and go into space, or were you just here on Earth?
I don't know.
Okay.
I just recall I have memories of being in, over the years as I grew up, of being in what I can only liken to classroom situations, learning situations, where I was with groups of children my age, always around my age as I grew up, and they were teaching us things. like the importance of sound and vibration, the importance of intent.
Mm-hmm.
And they, I believe, helped me to fine-tune the natural abilities that I had as a sensitive anyway.
Okay. Okay. So interesting. You're right. Time is a concept of man. It's interesting we look at that. So did you, when you see the star people, and I'm assuming there's a communication that's telepathic. It's not, I'm sitting there. Do you see the same ones over and over? Is it different every time? What's that look like?
I've seen, I don't know how many different species, numerous different species of beings. Most of them are humanoid in shape in that they have the head, trunk, arms, legs. Other than that, they can vary greatly.
Okay.
Some I've seen look like us, and you wouldn't know the difference except for their pupils. Their pupils are different.
How so? What's different about the pupils?
Some of them have pupils that are like cat eye pupils.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but most people wouldn't notice the difference. Just to look at them from a distance, you wouldn't notice the difference.
Okay.
Except for mostly they're quite tall and very good looking.
Oh, okay. Very good looking. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, is there a different time of day that you get these connections with the star people? Is it at night? I mean, is it all over the place?
All over the place.
Okay.
One of my earlier experiences happened about 10 o'clock in the morning. And that was witnessed by a number of people.
Okay. Yeah. So have you written books, or have you cataloged or journaled any of this? No. Okay.
No, never have.
Never have. Okay. Just interesting, because I mean those are very interesting experiences. Okay. Was there one that really sticks out in your mind other than the first one, where you were the craft was following you, you thought it was a vehicle, okay, a car? Are there ones that were just like, wow, this one just going to remember forever?
No, not really. There's been so many of them that they just, I just accept them.
Okay.
I don't know how to stuff they've told me stays with me.
Right.
Probably the thing that they told me that has stayed with me the most, and it was told to me by one of my favorite star people that I absolutely love. And he said to me, Marianne, when you do anything, you must do it from your heart. When you think from your heart. When you speak from your heart. When you act from your heart. And his words really, really impacted me so strongly. And so for my entire life, that's how I've tried to work.
Okay. Now, you're a creative person, an artist, a sculptor, jewelry creator, illustrator. Have you ever created things in the image of your star people, the star people you see?
I did try drawing some star people once back in, oh gosh, I think it was in the 80s. I did a few drawings of them. Mostly it was more like when I drew a baby in a hand amongst the universe, being held in a hand in the universe, but not my people specifically, no.
Okay. Do you know or meet with other or associate with other people who have your gift? I know you got a Facebook group, okay? And there's probably a lot of people following you just out of pure interest, okay? Yeah. And bewilderment, okay? Because I'm sitting here thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. But do you have peers that you share experiences and stuff with?
No, I'm pretty much a loner, actually. I tend to keep myself to myself. I don't really mix with spiritual communities. It's not my scene at all. And there's a number of reasons for that. One of the things, and it goes back to what my star people have taught me and the knowing that I have about how things are run on this planet. And spirituality, is as much control mechanism on this planet as any religion is.
Okay.
So I try not to mix.
Okay. Now, over time, I'm guessing, as a child, you ran into people, didn't have it, didn't understand it. Did you learn to just keep this to yourself? Or if you ever shared it, did people scorn you and say, hey, Marianne, you're batshit crazy?
Yeah. I've had that all my life. I don't care.
Okay.
I really don't. I've learned to say, well, this is my truth. This is my knowing. I don't care if you believe me or not.
Sure.
What does it matter?
Okay. Now, another odd question that comes to my mind, just, that's how my mind works and that's how the show works is,
It's good.
do you have, or did you have organized religion in your life at all? Or is this in parallel or separate or replacement?
Yes. My mum used to make us go to church. Yeah, definitely. But no, I don't. I'm not religious in the least.
Not religious. Okay.
No.
Fantastic. All right. So,
but it doesn't mean I don't believe that there's a universal creator, but not as man sees him.
Not as man, organized churches and that type of stuff. Churches, I'm a person of faith, but if you take a step back and look at it, churches are for the people. It's not really for, a lot of that's the social and educational aspect of spirituality. People might argue with me or get mad at me about that, but so what? I am what I am. And I basically, I do believe in the higher power of the Lord and those types of things. And so just curious how that fit into your life, because, some people would wonder, is that in parallel and that kind of thing. In your professional career, did it ever impact you, like when you were a nurse or those types of things where, I wouldn't say spirits or star people were getting in the way, but were there times that you're like, okay, time out, I need a break from all this?
No.
No.
In fact, during my nursing career, my abilities saved lives.
Okay.
On more occasions than I can recall. I would always know when a person was going to have a reaction to a blood transfusion before they even started the transfusion. So I'd tell my co-workers, whoever's looking after that person, I'd say, you need to really keep a close eye on them because they're going to, something's going to, sure enough, they would.
I remember we were with my father when he passed away, and there is no doubt that we saw his spirit leave his body and rise above. There's just no question about it. It was a very unique experience. And so I'm just, in your nursing career, obviously you're around people who passed away. Were you able to see them leave their bodies and go into the next existence?
I never ever saw that, but I always made sure that nobody ever died alone. I had many patients who had no family. And the nurses would go and do their thing, and my shift would finish and I'd just stay with them till they died because I didn't want them to be alone. And the nurses would do the best that they could, but you're busy. So you do what you can and then you have to go on to the next patient. So I would stay with them. I would talk to them. I would say it's okay. I always felt when they left, but I never saw.
Yeah. Okay. So with this gift that you have, do you use it to benefit things? How do you, everybody looks at a gift and says, I can do this or that with it, right? Or I can help other people, or I can do these things. Do you ever take this gift and these skills and say, well, I'm going to do this or that with it?
I'm always using my skills, and I try to help people where I can, because that's my gifts aren't for me. They're given to me so that I can help others.
Okay.
And that's what my star person was trying to tell me was, to be compassionate, to be understanding, it's not that doesn't mean I'm not human. I don't get angry and I don't curse and swear, and I do.
Yeah.
But, the gifts are to help other people, so that's what I use them for. Are you asking me, do I try to make money off them?
Not so much that. I mean, money is not a measurement of success. Okay.
No.
And
No,
money's
no.
not a measurement of contribution in my mind.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, it's like anything else. What do you do with it? I'm really good at interviewing. I'm a really good podcast hoster and stuff
Got
like
you.
that.
Sorry.
So I'm using that skill for these reasons, or I'm a really good at communicator, speaker, those types of things. And so I try to
Right.
use those skills, but not knowing it. I mean, you're the very first person I've ever met, talked to in person, or know of that is a medium or a spiritual sensitive. Just wondering. I mean, do you do something with it?
I got you. I didn't understand what you were asking. Yes, I use it. I use it all the time. I use it to help the members of my group. I use it to help people who are grieving.
Okay.
I get, and this may trigger some people, and I apologize for this in advance. I have a lot to do with both spirit who have committed suicide and people who are grieving those who have committed suicide. Get a lot of that, comes up regularly. And one of the things that I'm able to do, because of my knowing of how it is for those who have passed, who have committed suicide, that I'm able to help at least bring a measure of comfort to those who are dealing with this, because there's always so many unanswered questions. Why didn't I see it? Why was there something I could have, all these questions that we have when somebody passes. By that way. So I use my gifts all the time to help people in the group, whether it's to answer questions that they may have, basic questions about developing their own spiritual abilities, or just I try and help where I can. That's what I do. I can't, like I had to retire from nursing because I had a fall on duty one night, and I hurt my back very badly. An old lady had peed on the floor. I didn't see it, and I slipped and fell in it. And so finally I got to the stage where I couldn't work anymore because my back was so bad. I'd be on duty for half an hour, I'd be in tears. And I came away and I missed so much, knowing that I was making a positive difference in people's lives, even if they, like there was nothing we could do to help them heal. At least I could make the time that they had as comfortable as possible and as dignified as possible, or help them with their passing, so they weren't alone, things like that. And I really missed knowing that I could do that. So that was one of the reasons I started my Facebook group, so I could continue helping in whatever way I could.
Okay. So now I know there are all different types of clears. Okay. So do you have the capability to help find lost things, like lost people?
God, no, I can't even find my house keys half the time.
Okay. Because, I'm a consumer of media, and you see these people where they're solving murders and finding bodies, or people missing, and they turn up places that these people say they are. And so I'm just curious if you have that kind of clear.
Yes, I do. And I had a lady I knew one time, and I don't like to do this because, I'm human and I can make mistakes, and I would never want to cause somebody pain by giving them inaccurate information. So it's not something that I do, and I won't do again. But this one lady, she came to me because she was a friend, and a friend of hers had disappeared, and her friend came to me and said, look, I've been murdered. This is what happened. This is where my body is. This is how you'll find me. And I could see her in my mind's eye. I saw how she was lying, and I saw she had something in her mouth, and I thought, oh, what's that? That's really weird. And I didn't know the part of the country where she lived, but I described it to my friend, and she said, can you contact the police? And I said, look, the police aren't going to listen to me. They're not going to take anything I say, and they won't, because mediums, they're just flaky people. They don't know anything. Anyway, she phoned me back a couple of days later and said, Marianne, they found her exactly where you said she was, in the position you said she was, and they found her ear in her mouth.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was really hard. And the hard thing for me is because I'm clairsentient, I feel the emotions that spirit feels.
Right.
And I feel the emotions that whomever I'm talking with feel. So I get a double whammy. And it's really can be really emotionally overwhelming at times, and very, very draining. And so that's not something that I really want to do.
Okay. So do you ever get to the point where this is just overwhelming that you're like, okay, shut it off. I need to go on vacation from this at any particular time?
It's happened once or twice before I learned to set boundaries.
Okay.
But now I have really firm boundaries, so that doesn't happen.
Okay. That's interesting. Again, I know nothing about.
It's like everything in life, you have to have boundaries.
Sure.
About what's acceptable to you and what's not. And honestly, I think before you can really know what your boundaries are, you have to know yourself.
Sure. Interesting. So, do you work on this skill at all? I mean, is it something, or is it just innate and you just have it? And do you ever feel the need to like sharpen your ability to see or listen?
I'm always working, and spirit is always putting me in situations where I have to work harder to get information because it teaches me. So I'm always learning. Never stop learning.
Never stop learning.
No. It's an ongoing thing. I don't consider myself an expert in anything. I'm still learning.
Sure. I mean, the older I get, the more I realize what I really don't know.
Yeah.
And I try to be as humble as I can because, gosh, there's just so many things in the world to know.
Oh, there's so much to learn, isn't there? It's really,
yeah.
I feel like a sponge sometimes. Sorry.
So when you, no, you're great. When you see media reports or news out there where someone is, identifying a UFO or there's been a sighting or those types of things, how does that make you feel? I mean, you go, wow, okay, that's my friends, or no, you dummies, that looks made up. I mean, what does that make you feel when you see reports of UFOs in the media?
This leads down a very different path, and I'm not sure you want to go down.
Okay. You haven't scared me. You haven't scared me yet. So
sorry, I'm wriggling around a bit. My back's starting to cramp.
No, I understand with your injury there.
So my knowing is quite different, and because I've had teaching for my star people all my life. So I don't take anything that the media says at face value. Mostly they're controlled by what the governments allow them to say. And I was told back in the 80s, that the governments had been given notice that they had to release to the general public information about extraterrestrial beings and life off this planet, or the choice would be taken out of their hands.
Okay.
Because humanity has the right to know for themselves,
right,
without being controlled by governmental influences. So over the past couple of years, I've noticed especially that the US government, but all of the governments in the world, but specifically the US government, has been releasing, drip feeding the public bit by bit by bit. In fact, last year, they pretty much came out and said UFOs are real and therefore extraterrestrials exist.
Yeah.
So when the government acknowledged that those Tic Tac UFO videos, the military videos that were released, were genuine military videos. They said, yes, they're genuine. We don't know who created them. So basically they're saying, yes, they're real, but they're not created on this planet. So therefore, extraterrestrials are real.
Okay.
And because, of course, this happened during the major COVID outbreak, nobody paid much attention.
Yeah.
So it gives the government a bit of plausible deniability. So when they come out in a few months' time and say, these are extraterrestrial beings, and everybody will say, why didn't you tell us? And they'll say, well, we mentioned it back then. We already told you. Yeah, it's a setup. So it's only a matter of time before they introduce specific species to the human population.
Okay. So, I was born in 1965, so I'm a decade younger than you. And on November 16th of 1977, that was the date that Close Encounters of the Third Kind was released. Okay.
I love that movie. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so when that was released, it opened a lot of people's eyes, or maybe hit their reticular activators, so they started paying attention to it more, about UFOs and extraterrestrial beings. You had the movie E.T., that followed not too far after that and stuff. So there was a really big awareness in the late 70s, early 80s. Do we see that much of it now? I mean, you said the U.S. government's been dripping it out, and I pay attention. I'm here in Colorado. We're not that far from New Mexico, and you see the Area 51 things and the secret bases and those types of things. Do we see as much of that today as we did, say, back when it was sort of popularized in the late 70s?
I think in some aspects it's quietened down. However, when they do happen, the way they are reported is different.
Okay.
It's no longer treated with scorn and derision by the news media. They take it seriously. Mm-hmm. They treat it as a serious subject, and they don't joke about it. And this is all part of social manipulation to alter the public's opinion about them.
Sure. Well, and we're seeing censorship on all kinds of silly topics. So it doesn't surprise me one all, because when we go on social media, about 80% of our connection to the world and information starts in social media.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that this type of stuff just might be suppressed also. So very interesting. I find this topic very, very fascinating. Now, one more question that comes to my mind on all of this is, are star people involved in some of those things like the crop, what do they call those?
Crop circles.
Crop circles and those types of things?
I don't know about the crop circles. They fascinate me, but I don't have any answers to that. I'm sorry. I'm as in the dark as you are. But can I go back for a minute, back to your government?
Sure.
There may be listeners who aren't aware that some months ago your government was given notice that they had to release all their information. It was passed into law that they had to release all their information on UFOs and star people to the general public.
That's true. They did, because we have that law here in the United States about the Freedom of Information Act. And so everything will be released over time. Everything.
No. They had a specific amount of time.
Okay.
And then they had to open all their files to everybody.
Okay.
This is above and beyond your Freedom of Information Act.
Well,
this is a law that was passed some months ago by your Congress. And it was all over the news, all over the social media. And I can't remember, I think it was 9 months or something, but at that stage, but I think it's like maybe 3 or 4 months now before they have to release it. Well, so it's going to be a very interesting year this year.
Guess what I'm going to be doing tonight? I watch a lot of documentaries and research. I know what I'm going to be looking for tonight. So that'll be crazy.
There's a great documentary that I recommend, and I interviewed James Fox, who created this documentary. It took him something like 11 years to make it, and it's called The Phenomenon, and it's still #1 documentary. Since it was released last October, it's still #1 on Apple, I think, in documentaries. Okay. It's the best documentary I have ever seen on the UFO subject.
Okay.
You've got the military guy who used to be the Assistant Secretary of Defense, was the chap who actually released those TikTok videos to the public.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he's interviewed on, it's a really, really great video. And the interview that I had with James was really interesting as well.
Well, I think today what I want to do, I'm going to have you back because I think there's a lot more to unpack here, but in compassion for your broken wrist and broken arm and broken everything here, That's about as big a cast as I've seen since one of my best buddies fell off his bicycle as a kid.
It's almost up to my armpit.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one. At least they put footprints on it, hound prints on it. Okay, so, but I think we'll come back because I'd like to unpack some of this stuff. So the last question I always ask all of my guests is a pretty simple one. We always have this thing called a bucket list in Western culture. These are the things I'm going to do before I die. Well, in the universe, there's an opposite of everything. Okay, and so the opposite list rhymes with bucket and starts with an F, but I won't say that. Okay, and so. You've been very transparent with us today. You've been very open. So very vulnerable situation by sharing all these things with us. Because, there's going to be believers and skeptics and then people like me who are going, wow, this is fascinating. What might be on your effort list? Now, I'll give you some examples of things that might be on mine. So everybody that knows me and listens, they know I'm not eating sardines again. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. They also know I'm not going back to Mexico City. I went to some business meetings and had to have armed guards to go to a business meeting. Crazy environment, crazy environment. Another thing that's on that list, I'll throw out there, I will never, ever do another sweat lodge. I did one of those, a Dakota sweat lodge, not going back. You can have that one. That's one for somebody else. So what might be an item or two that might be on your effort list, Marianne?
Oh gosh, well, when you were talking about sweat lodges, the first thing that came to me was saunas. Oh, I don't like them. I feel claustrophobic, and no,
my goodness!
Out.
Listen to the episode. I forgot. I'll get the number one of these days. I'm about to pull a list so I can compare. I did an episode earlier back, probably around the 20s or 30s, where I shared my experience of the sweat lodge. And if you don't like heat, and if you don't like claustrophobia, and if you don't like crowds, it was almost for me, it was the most unsufferable thing I've ever done in my life. It was horrible.
Oh yes, I can totally get that. I'm with you on that. I guess the other thing for me is being in crowds.
Crowds, okay.
I don't like being in crowds. I avoid it where possible because I pick up everybody's energies, their feelings. And so it can be quite overwhelming for me on a physical level. So I tend to stay away from it. And plus I'm short. I'm under 5 foot. So
oh my goodness.
Yeah, in a crowd it's really hard for me to see where I'm going.
Wow, dynamite in a short package. Well, thank you for coming on today. I really enjoyed this. It was really educational for me. Now I've got my finger pricked to go figure out a lot of this and do some study. So you absolutely have motivated me to take a look at this. What a great individual you are. And so thanks for coming on. I mean, it's kind of fun. We're almost paranormal here with our time zones. We're, back to the future, right? Because it's Tuesday afternoon here, but it's Wednesday morning over there. So, that's a little bit of time travel for us.
Oh, so
thank you, Marianne, for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me, Rex. I really appreciate it.
Okay. We're going to call it a wrap for this episode. We will get Marianne back. There's lots of things to unpack here and explore. I'm going to have a whole lot of questions. I'm going to go do some research and get a whole lot of questions. So don't forget to stop by the show website, which is rexandrewshow.com. and get the information there about Marianne and the things she's doing and all of our guests that we have on the show. So until next time, I will say the things I always say is to be safe, but be bold and make it a great day.